my dad was suffering the effects of post-traumatic stress and was effectively ambushed by people he felt were the enemy, and he ended up dead on the front door of his house that he built with my mum to raise his family in. My family history comes with quite a bit of trauma. My grandparents, so far as I'm aware, met in a concentration camp, Auschwitz actually. My grandfather had the tattoo. He died before I was born, but the family accounts that he was very paranoid when they moved out here. They lived on a farm down in Kettering, and I was actually listening to a podcast that my cousin did the other day. He was in the SAS for upwards of 20 years. He was talking about my grandfather, and he has been told stories that he would see people coming down the driveway and get the shotgun ready, and he was just paranoid that what happened to them in Europe was going to happen here.
What year was your father born?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. Dad was born in 1948. If I've got that wrong, I apologise.
Around 1948.
So he was born actually in Germany on a train. So although my grandfather was Polish and my grandmother was Czechoslovakian, his death certificate, because we don't have his birth certificate, says that he was born in Germany and therefore German.
Okay. And so your dad predominantly grew up out here?
Yes, my family moved over when my dad was about 2. He was the only boy of 7 children, and I believe the second eldest. 6 sisters, all of whom gave him a hard time and he gave them a hard time back. They grew up down in Kettering, went to the Woodbridge District School. I think my family did it pretty tough when they came out here. They were obviously very different. They had the European accent. They didn't speak English before they came out here. And I think my grandparents in particular really struggled with their experiences over in Europe. They never spoke about it. It was off limits. My grandfather sadly died in the 70s. As the result of a car accident, which brought my dad home early from Vietnam and gave my auntie significant mental health issues. She was also in the car. And yeah, it was really just a trauma-filled life for my grandmother and my grandfather until he died.
Would you say that that trauma, in many ways, you spoke about your father going to Vietnam, but that trauma was part of his life as well, with the overlay of Vietnam?
There was definitely overlaps with my dad's experience and my grandparents' experience. I think he learnt not just from society to not talk about what happened to him, but his parents never spoke about what happened to them. So it was, not expected for him to talk about it, and it was really just expected to crack on and get on with things.
Let's talk about your dad's service. Was he in the regular army or was he national service?
There's some conflicting evidence about how my dad ended up in the army. I've looked up the records. His birthday never came up in the national lottery. However, he is registered as national service. I did hear a rumour at one point that maybe he was given the option of being charged with a crime or volunteering for national service, which cannot be confirmed by anyone in the family. So I guess that's open for interpretation. My dad's service in Vietnam was quite traumatic. He was with 7 RAR. He was a forward scout in his section. He didn't talk about it a lot, but we've heard a lot of stories over the years. I don't have any memories of my dad, so everything I know of him and his service are memories from other people. I know that he was a good soldier. He was encouraged to stay on after his conscription or national service ended. And there are some funny stories amongst the trauma, but the ones that really stand out to me are just really impactful, awful situations. One story that I was told when I was quite young was that he'd gotten into a contact. Most of the enemy had died, and there was one soldier, Viet Cong soldier, left alive. And my dad broke orders and stayed with him and held his hand until he passed away, because he didn't believe that anyone should be alone when they die. They were fighting for what they believed was right, just as any soldier does.
Dad came home, and you said he came home early because of your grandfather being involved in the vehicle crash. Do you know how much earlier than his tour was to end that he returned home?
The tours in Vietnam at the time were 12 months and Dad did 11 months. So he was nearly at the end of the rotation. Early 1971, the car accident happened, so he came home on compassionate leave. And actually the day that my auntie woke up from a coma, my grandfather passed away.
Right, okay. And of course, so your father came home early, so he didn't come home with the people that he deployed with, and he came back to Tasmania. What was his life like after that?
There's a lot of gaps in what I know about what happened with Dad after Vietnam. I know that he was a bit of a rat bag. He grew a bit of dope, which at the time was a bit of a bigger deal than it is now. He'd had some troubles with post-traumatic stress, and really had a lot of trouble getting any sort of cover or compensation from DVA. He had a chronic back issue from where he fell out of a helicopter as it was coming into land, and they wouldn't recognise that injury or give him any cover. He was unable to work. So I know that when he was with my mum, so he came home in the 70s, he met and got together with my mum in the 80s. Mum talks about him having a lot of troubles and needing to go bush and decompress. And unfortunately, his mental health escalated, and he just couldn't find the right help. Not long before he died, he had started accessing the Vietnam Veterans Counselling Service, which Mum believed was helping, but unfortunately this incident with the police got in the way of him ever being able to find peace.
Do you want to talk about that incident?
In 1991, my dad was suffering from a post-traumatic stress episode. Unfortunately, when he was experiencing those episodes, he could become quite aggressive. Not physically violent, so far as I'm aware, but he had made threatening phone calls. My mum had actually taken my brother and I to the women's shelter. She had decided at that point that Dad really needed to work on his mental health before we could all live together as a family. And he had made threatening phone calls to my grandfather. I'm not sure who called the police, but somebody called the police and the Special Operations Group were sent up. The story about what happened up there is, in my mind, unknown, because Tasmania police made accusations about my father's behaviour, which the evidence showed were probably not true. And after one shot was fired, my dad died, surrounded by the enemy in a place that was supposed to be safe for him. And later on, a ballistics expert came out. One of the accusations that was made was that my dad was shooting at the police that had surrounded him. Later on, a ballistics expert came out and said that he had planted or tampered with the evidence, and the weapon that my dad was supposedly shooting at them with was actually broken and unable to be fired.
So the path that your dad had through Vietnam, the trauma of life, the trauma of Vietnam, he ended up really just falling out of the system and ended up being killed.
Yeah, my dad was suffering the effects of post-traumatic stress and was effectively ambushed by people he felt were the enemy, and he ended up dead on the front door of his house that he built with my mum to raise his family in.
So you, back in 2021, you put up a Facebook post about your dad, and this year you shared that memory that you put up in 2021, and that was observed by some people. And when I hand this to you, you'll know what it's all about. And basically, there, Michaela, for you to open on camera, was your dad is remembered as a hero.
Okay.
Now you have to use your fingers because I think you already know. From a mutual friend of ours.
Jan Marie.
I've spoken to her and she's asked me to deliver this to you in memory of your father, in memory of his service. Because as you know, for her, yeah, and for the rest of us, no one should ever be forgotten.
Put that down there.
Would you like to read that out?
It says Lance Corporal Joe Joseph Gilewicz with his service number, Nui Dat, 7 RAR, 16th of February 1970 to the 14th of Jan 1971. They're his dates of service in Vietnam.
There you go. So from Aussie Hero Quilts, Jan Marie Ball and her team, I'm very pleased to present that to you.
Thank you.
He's not forgotten.
Thank you. And that's really important to us, that he's not forgotten. Not just because of his service, but because it really highlights a gap in how we treat our soldiers and our veterans. The Vietnam veterans were at the front of the fight for getting cover and mental health services for veterans, but there's a long way to go, and things like this are still happening. Veterans are still losing their lives. And continuing to talk about people like my dad means that we can make progress.
Indeed. Indeed. So yes, no doubt you'll be making a phone call a bit later on, and having a talk to Jan Marie, who's done so much for so many people, and is very keen to ensure that no one gets forgotten.
It's really, really challenging to explain to the children about Dad. I grew up always knowing what had happened. I don't remember not knowing what had happened. And I think my mum did a really good job of giving us the information when we asked for it. I'm really fearful for my kids finding out the full details of what happened to my dad, because he was at his home, which was supposed to be his safe place. it was the police who were supposed to be the people you call in an emergency to keep you safe. One of my daughter's best friends' fathers is a police officer. I don't want to instill a fear in them. I don't want to lie to them about what happened. I'm actually working with my psychologist on this because my daughter in particular, she's a little bit older, is really interested in why her grandfather isn't here. She talks about him a lot. I overheard her at school saying she gets her bravery from her papa, which makes me really proud that she talks about him and thinks about him, even though I don't have any memories of him. So it's just one day at a time. We recently talked about the fact that he was shot by a gun and died, but I haven't told her who or why or how. And one of the reasons is I don't know why or how or what happened. So it's really tricky to know what to say and when, particularly because we really just don't know the details. There have been suggestions that they went up there and shot him at point blank range, which is a horrible thought. And I don't know, what age do you tell your daughter that? It's almost like you feel like you're stealing their innocence. So,
What year was it?
It was 1991. It was a month after my first birthday.
And would it be fair to say that all these years later, the questions still remain?
The questions still remain, and I think, I've thought about this a lot. There's anniversaries every year. There's Anzac Day, there's Remembrance Day, there's his birthday, Father's Day. I grew up being the kid at school that didn't have a dad, so did my brother. There was bullying about that because we were in the news. The question of what happened to him is always there. We don't know if he knew he was dying. We don't know if he knew he was alone. I think if, for example, they went up there and somebody panicked and they shot him because they were scared, and they came out and said, I panicked and I shot him because I was scared, at least then we would know. But we don't know, because there were lies and there were cover-ups, and whether that was just because they were panicking about what happened or because they went up there and did the wrong thing on purpose, we're never going to find that out. And that is, we can't get any closure. So what do you do with that?
I think as he looks over your shoulder, I think he'd be very proud, very proud. And the fact that you went through that whole system and you didn't get to serve on your terms, you didn't get to leave on your terms, but you've turned it into a positive where you're out there now helping other people. You're out there as a role model for those that are struggling. And I think your dad would be good on you, kid. Good on you. Good on you.